Okay, now for our main event here, our speaker, Father Vincent Anyama, and we welcome him and we're super happy that he's here today. And a little background on Father, he was born and raised in Enugu, Nigeria. He studied at the Bishop Shanahan Secondary School of Orlu in Nigeria. He studied at the Holy Trinity Seminary in Dallas and St. Mary's Seminary in Houston. After his ordination to the priesthood in 2009, he served as parochial vicar at St. Francis of Assisi Parish in Frisco and as parish administrator of All Saints Parish in Dallas. In 2018, he obtained a doctorate degree in dogmatic theology from the Gregorian University in Rome with a specialization in the theology of Benedict XVI, Joseph Ratzinger. After his doctoral studies, he served as sacramental minister at Corpus Christi Parish in Ferris before beginning his several years of ministry and priestly formation at St. Mary's Seminary in Houston and Holy Trinity Seminary in Dallas. In his several years of seminary work, he has served as vice rector at St. Mary's Seminary in Houston and as vice rector at Holy Trinity Seminary in Dallas. Besides seminary work, he has taught systematic theology at St. Thomas School of Theology in Houston and at the University of Dallas in Irving. He was appointed rector of Holy Trinity Seminary in March 2022, effective July 1st, 2022. And his favorite quote is from St. Ambrose of Milan, Omnia Christus est nobis. Okay, I'll translate. To us, Christ is all. And I love that quote. I love St. Ambrose. So we're really happy and welcome Father Vincent. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a very kind introduction. That was a very, very kind and generous introduction. Sometimes with these introductions, I wonder, I've forgotten I had done all these things. And I'm not getting any younger, even though I look like one of the seminarians, but I am not. It is a joy to be in your midst. It is truly a delight. I've been here before when the podium used to be, I believe, on the other side, facing this way. And thank you for that introduction. That gives you a sense of my life and my vocation as well, in the midst of really the Lord's providence. First time I heard about Dallas was when my parents wrote me a letter. I was in the seminary, my first year in the seminary in Nigeria at the time, and had sent me a letter, just told me that my mom won the diversity visa lottery, which I'm sure most of you know about, and that we are going to the United States. And I was 20 years old at the time, and we are going to Dallas, where my uncle is. And I remember thinking, Dallas, what kind of name is that? But sometimes when I hear these introductions, I'm amazed at what the Lord does with our lives. I still see myself as a little kid in Nigeria, grew up in a village, learned how to swim in the river, tiny river, did my clothes in the river with my siblings, and went to a very modest school. And then my dad studied in with the influence of the Irish missionaries, the Puritans. One of them was the Bishop Shanahan, who was very instrumental to the propagation of the faith, the Catholic faith, in the south and east of Nigeria. Really poured out his life and his heart to the life of the people, especially during the Civil War in the 60s in the Biafra area. And just to be a part of that legacy and all of a sudden to be uprooted, as it were, to a place that I do not know anything about. And yet that is where the Lord has desired for me to build my life. And 24 years later, here I am. And in the middle of it, to have the opportunity to go to Rome and spend 4.5 years of studies for the diocese. That it's all God's providence. I am the blessed priests in the role that I have at Holy Trinity Seminary to think of each of the young men entrusted to me with the help and the assistance of the priest faculty to prepare them for the thousands of souls that they will touch and that they will serve in the life of the church. It's just the thought of it sometimes for me is overwhelming, is very humbling, and just deeply grateful. I hope I do okay. Ultimately, it is God's work. And I think that just looking at a year like this year, actually starting last year, well, goes back to when I was named the rector on St. Patrick's Day. By the way, St. Patrick's is the patron saint of Nigeria. And Bishop Burns couldn't have picked a better day to call me in his office and kind of turn my life upside down. I just wanted to just teach at the university and hide somewhere, write a book or something. But he asked me to be a rector, the rector of Holy Trinity Seminary. And since then, really, the work that my predecessor, Father Swift, James Swift, had done, an amazing work at the seminary, really set us up for success. But something that I was entrusted with as a new rector was to start to implement the new program of priestly formation, the 6th edition, that was just published. Actually wasn't yet published when I was named director, but it was to be published this summer of 2022 to implement that program in the seminary. And part of that program is a new stage in priestly formation, which really the roots of it is not new in terms of the tradition of our faith. And that is the propedeutic stage as the foundational and introductory stage for priestly formation. Some call it the novitiate of diocesan priestly formation. So, the Dominicans and Franciscans, other religious orders have years of novitiate. The novice is someone who is new, right? And you before entering into an order and committing yourself to it, you have to familiarize yourself with the life and expose yourself to the life of the community before you make a vow. It is also, so that's part of kind of in the tradition of our faith, in the religious communities, it's always been a time of transition from whatever secular life or a life that a young man's been living before to a life of commitment fully to consecrate his life in service to the Lord. But not quite as fully someone who has made their full final vows. Is actually to prep one to decide. We call them sort of a second discernment, to decide whether to commit into the formation process of becoming a Dominican, a Franciscan, and all that. So in some parts of the world, the diocesan seminaries have already implemented what we used to call a spiritual year, which kind of served the purpose of what the novitiate does for religious communities. And I'm very familiar with it. Growing up in Nigeria, dioceses have spiritual year centers as the entry level of seminary, of priestly formation. The young man who wants to enter seminary and discern priesthood first goes into a spiritual year. Oftentimes, those facilities are built in the middle of nowhere so that you can't just you get cut off a bit from the rest of the world. But the idea is to enter into the radical nature of the transition that one is kind of embracing in their life. And also to be a place of discernment, to know that discernment really starts with that focused conversation with the Spirit, right? With the Spirit. And then it involves some kind of basic human foundational formation as well. And so the propedeutic stage is really the universal church, Pope Francis wanting this transition year, this foundational year to seminary life for diocesan seminarians to become no longer optional throughout the world. And the document released by the Vatican in 2016, the Ratio Fundamentalis, which is the fundamental reason for really priestly formation, is one that I actually was able to read when I was a student in Rome. And I remember Father Bishop Dog Desertel, when he was still the auxiliary bishop at Dallas, sent me an email and said, Bishop Farrell wants you to take a class at the Congregation for Clergy on the new Ratio Fundamentalis. And I remember just sitting on the computer. I was taking German classes in Munich at the time. And I remember sitting there going, if I just type what is in my head, I'm going to regret it. So I'm just going to tell you what was going on in my head. I was already taking 7 classes at the Gregorian University. And now you want me to take 1 more class. So that was what was going on in my head. What did I write back? Of course, I am honored and delighted to take that course. And thanks be to God I did, because really once the U.S. bishops published the Program of Priestly Formation, new edition, the whole program itself is not something new to me. You know, I've already had, even though the classes were in Italian, but conversations were in Spanish and in English. So I learned a lot. Okay. But again, how providence works is interesting, right? That was part of the preparation for this time in 2022 when Bishop Burns asked me to be the rector, and I had to take up the implementation of this new Ratio Priestly Formation. The Holy Trinity Seminary, our focus is on college level, and so we have seminarians who are just graduate from high school, and we also have some who have already obtained degrees in colleges, but they have to receive formation on a college level before they move on to the theologate. So that's our focus. With the new program of priestly formation, the propedeutic stage becomes essential for us in that process, that before the young men actually start their philosophical studies, they have to go through the propedeutic stage. And so I looked down at the basement of the seminary and I saw space that is unused. And I started the renovation process and encouraged the bishop to give me the space to give it a try. And our first year, we had 20 men in the propedeutic stage. 10 of them were pre-theologians, those with degrees already, and 10 of them are on the graduate level. It was a very successful program, and I was hoping at the time the enrollment of the seminary was actually, so my first year we didn't have the propedeutic stage because I had to create space and create the programming. So once we started, we had about 53 in the house. My third year as rector, which is the second year as with the propedeutic program, I started getting this flood of applications. I projected that our enrollment will be about, I said maybe between 20 and 30, because I had room for 30 in the chapel, the oratory that I put together for the propedeutic program. I received 42 applications. I got nervous. I didn't know where to put them. So I prayed to the Lord. I said, I will not complain because I have all these Serrans praying for vocation, and it's working. Now I have to do something, put them in the woods or something, but we got them here, so we got to make it work. After the screening process, we ended up with 38 new men and that entered seminary, which put us at capacity. We have 76 rooms, and we started with 74 seminarians. So it is quite an exciting time in the life of Holy Trinity Seminary for us. And the Lord have been very good in responding to our prayers. And so keep praying. Let me worry about where to put them. Just keep praying. Keep praying. And they are very fine young men. One of the things that to understand about our work at the seminary is these men, they come to us very young. Some of them turn 18 upon entry at the seminary. And so they are learning a lot of basic human, disciplinary kind of way of living. And so human formation and spiritual formation is the primary focus of the seminary for us. And part of it, too, is they're not there because they're sure that they will be priests. Actually, if any of them tells me, Father, I am very, very convinced that I am called to be a priest, then I get worried. It is about a holy indifference, a disposition that really kind of is following the movement of the Spirit. It is the Holy Spirit that has drawn them to consider the possibility that God is calling them to the priesthood. And with that openness and attached to it a holy indifference, then we create space for God to work and to do his thing. Because if we look at scriptures, the way God calls and who he calls, it's still a mystery to me. I just look at myself and I'm still wondering, what was he thinking? And my ministry is about creating that space. It is very sacred, and let the Lord do what he does. As a priest and a rector in the seminary, I can't tell you if any of them will become priests. I can tell you that I'm glad they're there and I can see the fruits of the potentials that they have. But at the same time, there is a discernment work that we need to do. And that is just part of the process. And so some of them will discern out, and that is a good thing. And so as you pray for our work in the seminary, just remember that the prayers for the seminarians is for a good discernment for each and every one of them. And some of them who now have discerned out last year, and a couple of them have girlfriends, they can't get away from me. They just keep looking for me for spiritual direction. And I told them, I'm not going to talk to your girlfriend. I'm going to talk to you. There is a real fatherhood that comes with being a rector that is really a special gift that every day I wake up and I'm deeply grateful for. And each of them that walk through the doors of the seminary, they will always see me and the priest faculty, as their fathers, regardless of where the Lord leads them in their own lives. And so the work that we do is really super exciting. And one of the things that I would like to kind of focus on a little bit this afternoon, since I was told that you normally like to leave at 1 o'clock and you're not big fans of 3-hour homilies, is on Psalm 16:5. Psalm 16:5. Psalm 16:5, the Lord is my portion and my inheritance. This psalm was part of the rite of the introductory stage of priestly formation in ancient times, up until Vatican II. When a young man enters a community of religious life or seminary for priestly formation, there are different stages he kind of has to go through. And the first one, that is very propedeutic, right? Is very basic, very foundational, is a rite of receiving tonsure. Tonsure is what life and the Lord does to a lot of us over time, which is chopping off, part of your hair, especially this part that is, anyway. So the rite includes just an invitation into a radical simplicity. And that chopping off of a block of hair that is done by a priest or a prelate. And that also involves an investiture when the young man receives a new vestment, right? For Dominicans, it will be their white habit, right, that they wear. For the Franciscans, it will be the brown or the gray. And for the diocesan seminarians and some seminaries, they wear a cassock already. And so I received investiture when I entered seminary in Nigeria. I was there for a year and a half before I left, came to Dallas, and had to return back to the seminary and start all over again with the Diocese of Dallas, and I was ordained 9 years later. Part of it is being received into the community for sure, but also the vestment. Part of it comes also with this kind of a new name, right? And entering into a new sense of identity and commitment to the formation itself. And renouncing any kind of distraction from that formation process. So a seminarian who is spending a lot of time with a young lady, for instance, which we call sort of dating, it will be going against, right, the commitment that he has made upon entry into the seminary, because in that particular rite, a psalm that is prayed fervently is Psalm 16:5, a commitment to the Lord is my portion and my inheritance. Why is that significant and important? The Lord is my portion and my inheritance. I always like to tell my seminarians, if anyone asks you, what are you getting out of this thing you're doing? What do you get out of it? It is my hope that you arrive at a level of maturity to interiorly say, the Lord himself and his people is what I get out of it. The Lord himself is my portion and my inheritance. Young men, before as part of rite of passage and then kind of receiving inheritance of maybe their father, a land, or whatever it is, for a man who is committing to his life, to religious life and service, the Lord himself and his people is all he gets. And that is an invitation to the radical simplicity of life that from the get-go is the first of the virtues for a young man who is preparing for the priesthood. That when we're ordained priests, we promise obedience to our bishop and their successors. We also promise celibacy. There is a commitment to simplicity of life as really the first step, because in that, one's heart embraces a singular purpose. I remember when I was about to leave Nigeria, leave the religious order of Community of the Emmanuelites that I was with, and move to Dallas, Texas, wherever that is. The last conversation I had in front of my grandfather's house, my mom's side, with his younger brother, who is now deceased, but a very wise man, was a police officer. The last conversation I had with him in front of my grandfather's house was one that was very brief but memorable. He noticed that I was anxious as a young man. I was 20 years old. In this decision of leaving what I thought was my dream and having to join my family to go to a place that I have no idea what it will look like, and possibly may mean that I lose my vocation, but I will be distracted from what I've already begun. And he looked me in the eyes and he says, tenacity of purpose is all you need. Singularity of purpose is all you need. And I remember it. And it makes more sense to me as a priest, as a formator, as a rector. When I speak to my seminarians, I am trying to pass on what I received from my great uncle. Tenacity of purpose, singularity of purpose. That's your commitment when you enter into seminary and start that propedeutic stage. While no cleric is going to chop off your lock of your hair or you receive an investiture, you don't need that because nature will do that to you. Don't worry. But the spirit of it remains, singularity of purpose. That is the beginning of the priestly virtues. That's what simplifies our heart. That's what simplifies their heart. Their portion is the Lord. Their inheritance is the Lord and his people, and that's it. And when you do minister with the poor, that's also one thing that resonates with me and the poor all the time is they're able to recognize, because of their total dependence on the Lord, that all they have is the Lord himself and their community. That's what simplifies one's heart. And that's what we can always learn from the poor. We look at Christ himself. He had one food that wakes him up, the smell of one food that wakes him up in the morning. That is to do the will of his Father. That is his singular purpose, and he was tenacious about it. The church is very wise in inserting in the life of a seminarian and the priest every Thursday in their night prayer. The night prayer that we pray is actually Psalm 16:5, to make sure that we return on the Thursday, which is the day of the institution of the priesthood, the very beginning, the purpose, and the focus of who we are, and why we are doing what we're doing, and what we get out of it. What do we get out of it? The Lord himself is our portion and our inheritance. When I think of when I laid down on the floor of Our Lady of Guadalupe Cathedral on my ordination day, 2009, that's precisely what that gesture communicates. A debt to self, but a commitment to a new life. That once I get up, after all the invocation of so many dead people, we call them saints, I'm no longer the same person, that I am constantly accompanied by the saints in a mission that is not worldly, in a mission that is about the Lord and his people. There is a real debt to self, and there is an expression of the simplicity of the heart of a priest. I hope that my reflection gives you a little taste of the ministry of a rector in the seminary, and also gives you a little taste of what the Lord is inviting these young men that you all are praying for into. It is, it's not easy, because sometimes when I speak to them, they look at me like I have 10 horns or something. But I also know I've been doing this is my 7th year, and I know what it looks like to be able to be asked by a young man to be ordained a priest. Father, can you vest me in my ordination? Because I couldn't have done this without you, right? And this happens over and over again, the older I get. It is a true joy in doing what we're doing. All that I have shared with you actually is also something that I'm a beneficiary of spending time in studying the works of Pope Benedict XVI and Joseph Ratzinger. He's actually reading him, studying him, especially his life as a priest. I understood my own life as a priest better, and I've been strengthened by it. And one of his favorite quotes that he hangs on to, and whenever he talks to seminarians, because of how much it influenced him as a young seminarian, was Psalm 16:5. The Lord is my portion and my inheritance. Keep praying. Keep up the good work. Thank you.